Welcome to the Athletic Football Show in this edition of In the Pocket. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, longtime NFL quarterback Chase Daniel. Chase, how you doing?
Good. We're at the midway point, man. It's crazy. It's wild. Like I was doing a show the other day and talking about, like, someone brought it up. It's the midway point. I was like, what? It's already the midway point? Like, it's wild because when you're playing, it seems like the days just drag on and the weeks drag on because of the monotony of just like you're doing the same thing every Tuesday, same thing every Wednesday, same thing every Thursday. And then so when you're playing, it feels a lot longer. But when you're not playing and newly retired and on the show, it's like, oh, like it's already been through 9 weeks. Like it's completely different. So my mind's crazy. I played in a charity golf tournament on Monday. And I just felt like, for whatever reason, the first time I felt like I need to be doing something else and having fun. Like I feel like I need to be preparing for a game, or I feel like I need to be studying film. And then it's like, well, no, step back. Like, you've done it enough. Like, you can do it. So like, I think that was just like a big reckoning for me. Like, hey, it's good. Just relax a little bit.
For me, the first quarter of the season felt like it happened very fast. But when you get 4 games in, you still don't make any definitive statements. It's still such a small sample. And so that felt like it went a long time. We're like, it's only 4 games. And then to me, it felt instantly like we were at the halfway point. And now I think you could actually make some more confident statements, confident proclamations about where some of these teams are, which we'll do a little bit today, but we'll also dig into some of the best performances from last weekend, some more big picture stuff. I want to continue down this road a little bit though. A lot of guys, when they retire, there are questions about, how am I going to fill my time? How am I going to find kind of purpose day to day? What has that process been like for you in year 1 away from the game?
Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting for sure, because like, I was a part of the NFL PA for, I guess 12 of my 14 years. And I was a voting rep for 8 of the 14. So I was in there, one of 32 guys making decisions, and those decisions affected not only, future players, but current players and former players as well. And the biggest thing we ran into and always talked about was, what does life after sports look like? How do you combat the just all of a sudden you are 25 years old and you've played 3.5 years, which is the average career, and you are retired at 25 and a half. What are you going to do? Because all you've done your entire life is play football. And it's a daunting, and honestly, like, people don't get it. Like, it's a scary thing to think about. And I think for me personally, I've sort of learned from past people to, like, hey, sort of see what you want to do a couple years before you know the end is coming. Mm-hmm. And that was media for me. And I think it helped last year that I worked for NFL Network while I was playing, right? And so I really enjoyed that. And then so I sort of had a plan going into this offseason, like, hey, the playing might still be on the table. If it's not, then I want to do this media thing. And then so honestly, like, dude, I'm more busy now than what I was playing. like all the kids drop offs. We had a kid party today. We got 3 separate kids. 2 of them go to separate schools. One of them's at home with us, who's 2 years old, who just wrecks the house at all times. Like, wife is constantly chasing around. So like, you have that. I'm making lunches. I'm drop off. I'm pick up. I'm doing 3 shows. I'm doing quarterback breakdown. So it's really felt good to sort of find a purpose, not only as a husband, but also to sort of feel like, okay, this is what we're going to be doing here for the foreseeable future, because I really like it. We've had a good time doing it. And so I've been one of the lucky ones to be able to have that happen to me.
What would you say you miss the most right now?
It's without a doubt the locker room. Like, not the practices, not the well, I miss the games, okay, actually going out there and doing it, but it's the camaraderie, right? It's the locker room talk. It's the where you can go to work and you're playing a game for a living. And now, granted, it's a very important game. It's, other than soccer, it's the most watched game in the entire world. And so that, to me, it's like, someone always told me this, and I think it was one of my long-term trainers who trained me in the off season for the past 14 years. His name is Todd Durkin. He said, you need to read this book. And I haven't read it yet, but it's like, how do you go from MVP to like a little bit of no one? Because you're at the highest stage, you're at the highest level. And I don't care if you're the 69th guy on practice squad, like the 69th guy on the team, you're like the one that's like, you are a part of something special. There's only 32 organizations in the entire league that has that. And then you go, all of a sudden you're out of the league, you're out of the spotlight, you're out. And so you got to sort of find a way, and you got to find like your meaning, like way deeper than just like a football player. Cause I always viewed myself as like, I'm a football player, but I'm way more than that. And so my identity wasn't truly in football, at least the last like 6 or 7 years. Probably the first 6, 7 years of my career, I was very like, this is who I. And then once I had kids, you get your priorities straight, you get married, you have all sorts of other things. So I think that really grounded me, and that's really helped along the way.
Mine is obviously on a much, much different level. I've been thinking about it a lot this week, though, because I'm going to my high school's game on Saturday. They're undefeated, and it's the playoffs. I'm like, I'm going to go. They've been to the state quarterfinals 7 times in 20 years. They've never made it past that, and that's how far we got. So every time they get that far, I like to go, because just in case they break through, like, it's a good program that has never made it. And so I'm going. So I've been thinking a lot about it this week, and I just vividly remember my freshman year of college being so depressed that fall, because you just didn't have that connective tissue that like is the way I defined myself for so long. And I remember walking out of my dorm, when it got to like October, and there was just a chill in the air, and it was a Friday night, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like I should be doing something right now. Like there's something missing right now.
Yes.
And that for me, that was 4 years when I was a teenager, let alone 15 years of your adult life as you're trying to ground yourself in who you are and where you find purpose and where you find meaning. So I always like talking to guys recently retired about that and just what that process is like, because I think it's really hard for people outside of it to understand.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't go through it, you can just look at it from sort of a 40,000 foot view up and just say, in general, retired guys are like, man, they had the best job in the world. Like, they made millions of dollars. They had everything. And it's just like, dude, okay, yeah, we get paid a lot, but we're humans. We are humans. There's a human aspect to this, that we have emotions. Yeah, we play a really cool game, but like people don't understand the day-to-day life and the scrutiny, and then honestly the sacrifices that our families have made for us to be able to go on this journey. Like my wife has moved us like 6 times in 8 years, and she's just like, I'm done. Like we're gonna stay here in San Diego. Like if you want to keep playing cool, you're gonna do it on your own though. Like I just can't do it. Kids are getting to school age, and I'm like, I think as you get older, right? I'm 37. I think I'm 37. I'm gonna be 30. I'm gonna be 38 this year.
You're a year older than me. That's what I know.
Cow. Yeah, I'll be 38 this year. That's wild. And then you're still playing a game as 38, and then you have 20-year-olds come into the locker room, and you just keep getting older. They stay the same age. It's just an interesting dynamic on how to balance all of that.
But we're about the same age. You're a year older than me. You're a year ahead of me in school and in high school. I remember like reading like high school football magazines when I was a junior, and like reading about the South Lake Carroll team you were on. But you've always been a year ahead of me. It's been very important. Like I'm very aware. I'm very aware of it. And the idea that you guys retire in their mid-30s, which is the age that I am now, and you kind of face all this uncertainty for the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life. Yeah. I mean, I know for athletes, mid-30s seems old, and that's what we understand. Guys retire at that age. But I kind of put myself in those shoes and just think, if I had to start over right now at the age that I'm in now and kind of face the rest of my life, that can feel pretty daunting.
Well, and then especially if you are think about like from a football perspective, it's a little different. Like I started playing football when I was 8 years old. Okay. And then you just take 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, that 14 in the NFL, it's 22 years. The last 22 years, all I've known is football. And I've been smart in that I've wanted to also learn other things and are passionate about other things. And just because I honestly, like even to year 10 or even 11, I was like, what am I going to do after I'm done? That's why you see so many guys get into coaching. Yeah. Because it's the next best thing. But then I was thinking, wow, I don't want to do coaching. Like they work so long, and I'm going to have no family life. My wife's going to divorce me. I won't have kids. Like no way, like no way. And then I was like, well, the media thing could be good. And then, I've always done like spoofs and all sorts of things. Like I did a Chicago Bears one. But about the Mitch Trubisky training camp one. And people were like, dude, I still get, because I was just like, I dressed up as a fan and I had a bucket hat on. And I tried to go around and get guys' autographs, and sure enough, 80% of the guys I went up to, including Mitch Trubisky and Matt Nagy, no clue who I was. Like put on a Bears jersey, a bucket hat on. It got like 1.5 million views in the first 24 hours, and I got so many people saying, oh my gosh, like you can, like, how in the world did you pull that off? You're good in front of the camera. And I think that was sort of the turning point. I'm like, well, I sort of enjoy it. I can be myself. And my whole thing getting to this media thing and this media game and what I'm doing and what I'll continue to do, I think, is just like, I just want to be myself. Like everyone else is taken. I don't want to try to be somebody I'm not. And that's sort of how I took it to the locker room. It was like, if you're a fraud, dude, you're going to get found out, whether it's now or 10 years down the road. It's hard to be a fraud. You can only be yourself. And so that's what I want to do is and teach the game. Like just let people have insights to the quarterback room. And there's so much in there. So it's really cool that I've been given the opportunity to sort of be able to do this on multiple platforms. And it's been fun so far. So hopefully we can continue this moving forward.
Your personality lends to it. I'm very jealous of that. I wish I was wired to do this well. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but
That's
we're going to do our best.
You're damn good.
I really, really don't, but I appreciate that. Let's get into some of the most important kind of notable stuff that happened this week. The Josh Dobbs performance, obviously we've talked about it a few different times on this show, but I want to kind of dig deeper and maybe take it a little bit wider than we have so far with some specific elements to it. Just first and foremost, though, you broke this down on your YouTube channel. You rewatched the game. I'm just curious, baseline level, what is the most impressive thing in your mind that you saw from him on Sunday as you think about the context of everything he had to go through?
The fact that he was able to get one completion. Like, I'm going to be completely honest. Like you, it is so hard to put into words what he was able to do, not only from the fact that he was with the Arizona Cardinals 5 days before, and he had just had a 3-touchdown performance, and then ends up leading a game-winning drive and having a 3-touchdown performance, 6 touchdowns in 2 weeks for 2 teams, like at the most important position in all of sports. Okay. So, I mean, he is a rocket scientist. Let's just be real with that. Like I saw the NASA shout out that NASA gave him. I'm like, that's so cool. Like NASA's giving a shout out on Twitter for what he's doing. But I just love the fact, like it could have gone really, really bad. Okay. Because the first 15 to 18 snaps he was in, it was a sack for a safety, Calais Campbell on a 3-man rush, and 2 separate fumbles. And on those fumbles, I will say he's trying to get the ball out. One of them, his right tackle causes it, and the other one, he's trying to throw it, and the guy strips him right there. But those are 2 turnovers and a safety on your side of the field. So you could have mentally just been like, man, like blow up, like I can't handle it, like no way. But it's just funny how sort of the team rallied together and how everyone rallied around him. And the fact that he was able to do what he did on 5 days. I mean, he didn't take a rep. He didn't take a rep in practice. So it's mind-blowing to me that he was able even to operate.
I was so impressed just with everything that was happening on the sideline, watching him and Kevin O'Connell, even in real time, when he'd come off and they'd be going through certain details about his drop and where he should be looking. And it's just so fun to watch a level of intentional coaching like that in real time, where you just see what really separates the guys who are so good at understanding the communication aspect of it, what he should be kind of communicating to his quarterback, how you articulate some of those ideas. It was so cool to watch. And one of the elements that I was just most blown away by is that later in the game, they had to use tempo. Like he's running the no huddle offense for stretches of this game without having any baseline knowledge, not only of how the no huddle works, but of how the offense works in general. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of take this a little bit wider and talk about some of the mechanics associated with tempo in the NFL. To me, it's been one of the bigger kind of underserved storylines in the entire league so far this year is how teams have tapped into it really to find offense during a season where offense has been hard to find.
Yes.
I use the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night against the Bucs as a really good example, where they're just working at the line of scrimmage. They're going fast. These Vikings against San Francisco on that Monday night game, where playing from the line of scrimmage really helped them. And so I wanted to talk about just how the mechanics of that aspect of the game works. How do tempo offenses work just in terms of the mechanics and just the steps that go into it? I'm sure it's different for individual teams, but just on a general level, just walk me through how this works.
Well, I think there's 3 different types of tempo. And let's just start with just one word code word plays, I guess you would say. So say, hey, banana. We used to have that. It was like K4, Y banana. It was the John Gruden one in New Orleans. Hey, banana. And it would be like that word. You probably have like you probably have 6 or 7, depending on the week of like, hey, bandana, banana, special, center, like all sorts of different words. And it can change every week. And the quarterback's just yelling it out. And you just want to go as fast as humanly possible. And it's not because they're doing it. It's usually good versus all plays. And you're just trying to catch them off guard. Usually it's like, hey, the offensive coordinator or the play caller will like call it into my ear or the quarterback's ear and say, hey, here's the play on first down. We're going to go banana second down. Like, don't even like, so you get 2 calls and you're alerting the huddle. Hey, look, guys, we practice it. We're going Y stick nod, X out right here. And then on the ball, get on the ball. Okay. And we're going to run banana, banana, banana. So that's sort of how it's into the year. And then you get up to the line, you run the Y stick X out, Y stick not X out, and then you're on the ball, just banana, banana, banana. And it's a formation, it's a play call, it's a personnel grouping, it is a protection all in one. So that word banana stands for literally everything everyone on there on the field knows. And they can do it from like multiple personnel groupings. So that's the best thing about it. You can do it from 12, 11, 22, 13. And that's something that teams would practice. And we would practice every week is like, all right, like it's easy to run a play out of 11 personnel, but let's see how we do it out of 22 personnel, 2 backs, 2 tight ends. And those backs are going to maybe have to line up at receiver based on the formation. So if that makes sense, if you're following me, and then you go up there and you try to run it. And there's no anything about it. It's just like, hey, let's just tempo into second down. And then another thing on that tempo into second down is that you can also have these plays on third down. And that's where I've had a lot of success, whether it be the Matt Nagy offense or the Andy Reid offense or Joe Lombardi offense. And that can be a little bit more extensive. And you usually use those code words when you want to tempo into third down when a team has a really exotic blitz package. Like I would take the Baltimore Ravens, for example, like, or the Minnesota Vikings back in their heyday, or even they're the most blitzing team. Let's just say Minnesota Vikings today. It might keep them out of their insanely crazy pressure package. So if you get the team in base defense on second down and you're in 12 personnel, and I'm playing the Minnesota Vikings, I'm damn sure probably going to tempo into third down to keep them out of this exotic pressure package, to keep this out of the quarterback wondering what's happening so fast and having to remike it, because it keeps their base defense on the field. And out of base defense, Minnesota is not that. They're going to bring 5. That's it. That's all they're doing. And so you can gain advantages by doing that on third down. Okay. The second one is a 2-minute. Like hey, we're in 2-minute mode right here. All right. So you're in 2-minute mode and everyone on the entire team knows, hey, we have a menu of 8 2x2 passes and 8 trips packages. So 2x2 formation, 3x1 formation. Here's the plays, and you learn it from OTAs on. And so it's like literally special. It's the same thing. Okay.
It's the same menu of plays. It's the same vocabulary.
It's different. I'd say it's different because week to week, the first ones, when I was saying like banana, those can change week to week. I would say your 2-minute package and tempo, those are your plays for the entire year, and you're rolling and you're running it. And that's the exact same thing. Now, the quarterback might have to tell the O-line, hey, trips. Okay, hey, we want 3-jet protection. The protection can change. The personnel changes, whereas the one-word tempo on maybe first down, those don't change. It's just like, is what it is. That's all you say. And so the 2-minute drill, if teams don't have those one-word code tempos, some people just like to be like, hey, let's just get, like, we're slow on offense. We've had 3 punts in a row. And I think Josh Allen honestly operates better out of the 2-minute tempo, which they have used. Because a lot of times when you're operating like that, and you're pushing a defense to get set, they're probably not going to do these crazy coverages and blitzes as well. So you're going to get more cover 2, cover 4, cover 3, man. And a lot of these are just good versus all. And if it's not, and you have 4 verticals versus cover 2, which really is not the best, or let's just say 4 verticals versus cover 4, and you just check the ball down, and you're playing faster, and it allows your quarterback really not to think, because he knows it in the back of his head, like the back of his palm. Like, it's just because you've practiced it all of OTAs, if that makes sense. And then the third one I'm sure you weren't ready for this long-winded
Oh,
answer, but I
this is
came prepared.
listen, you can go as long as you want to, buddy.
And
I'm loving this.
the third one is what I thought was, and I'm going to make a YouTube video of this because I thought this was like clinic tape from Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings against San Francisco 49ers. I thought what they did at the line of scrimmage really changed the game for that game against San Fran. And what they did was, hey, we called it like sunglasses or goggles. Just like take a look, line up in 3x1 or 2x2. Ready, blue 80, blue, hot. Okay, what are they in? KOC, get in my head. Okay, hey, let's go. Bingo. And so you're actually saying what is the best play at the best time versus the defense that they had. If that makes and I'm telling you, the Minnesota Vikings, he operated at the line of scrimmage. Kirk Cousins did more than I have ever seen him do it. And it was an amazing plan. And finally, not until the fourth quarter, San Fran decided, hey, you know what? When they check, we're going to check. So then things weren't open in the fourth quarter. And that's sort of when it got a little close. They finally made a change. So those are the three types of tempo that I've been around that can really affect the way the defense is playing. I need a drink of water now.
It's so fascinating because we've gotten to this place, if you look at kind of the landscape of the league, where defenses, it's a lot of just shell-based coverages. You line it up in a cover 4 look, it can express as anything. So the offenses need all-purpose plays, but also you have very few answers before the snap even happens. There's so many different ways the defense can distribute. It's hard to understand exactly what you're going to get. So how do you find ways to simplify those looks or give yourself more information? You can dictate it with personnel a little bit, and teams try to do that, but doing this with tempo by either one, keeping their personnel grouping on the field that you want on the field, two, keeping them simple because, like you said, they can't get into some of these more exotic looks, and three, you can get into the best play for the best look because you have a little bit more information. So this just feels like one tool, one weapon as defenses have risen to meet offenses that kind of give offenses a chance to have the pen last and continue to try to dictate to some of these defenses where it's become more difficult.
Yeah, and you hit it right on. That's exactly right. That's a little bit easier than what I said to understand and to.
You got the details. I got the dumbed down version. I'm ready.
Yeah, but the dumbed down version is really good too because I would say that's 100% correct because I would say defenses nowadays, and it's been like the lowest points per game through week 9 in like the last 20 years. Like it's like the year of the defense is what I like to say. Like it's wild. Okay, and I would say I don't necessarily think offenses have changed. I just think defenses has morphed into something that maybe helps them a little bit more, if that makes sense. Like they're able to understand how offenses are working a little bit better. And now offenses are having to go back to the drawing board a little bit. And you're seeing it more and more. Like I'm telling you, if you haven't watched the all 22 of that Minnesota Vikings performance against San Fran, I was impressed. Like it is truly like that is how you end up blitzing a defense. When defenses would say we're playing really well, San Fran was at the time on defense. Last 3 games, not so hot, but they've been playing really well. And then the way Minnesota was able to understand what they're doing to simplify it, but also to get like cover 3 beaters or this way of cover 4 beaters after like a play call had already been in and put a lot on Kirk's like plate. That to me was really, really good offensive football.
To me, that feels like an example of how important it is for a quarterback to be in a system multiple years. Because now that he's in year 2, halfway into his second season within that offense, you can start to build on the layers. That's just something you would never be able to do 2 weeks into your first season, but a year into it with an entire offseason to kind of digest what you want to be and who you are, that is a very good example of that to me.
Yeah. But I also think, like, you look at Josh Dobbs, he was in it for 5 days. And that's what's the crazy thing about it is that he was still doing that in the second half, but it was a little bit different. And it was the way he operated was, hey, get to the huddle, hut. And then he comes back and you can see it clear as day. And he's just sort of looking, he's listening to KOC in his ear. Okay. And KOC is like, hey, we got an out and a go on your left. He's literally telling him out, go. And on your right, it's an out and a hitch. Work this side versus cover 2, work this side versus. He's literally telling them all that in 15 seconds. I mean, almost every play. That's literally what Dobbs and KOC said. Mind blown, like amazing coaching job by KOC. And that's why KOC said, at the end of the game, he's like, I will remember this win for the rest of my life. Like it was,
It's
it
incredible.
was mind blowing. It is incredible. Like people literally like, and I'm trying to I'm trying to like, why is national media not like literally like salivating over this? And I saw a couple good articles on it, but like, it's just the way to operate. I can't even imagine being thrust in that situation.
I mean, we've already had a 15-minute long Josh Dobbs conversation on this show 3 or 4 weeks ago with what he was doing in Arizona and
Yes.
how he was redefining his career. And then you have this, which is it's one of the moments I'll remember from this season.
Yes.
You do this long enough, and I think this is probably my 10th, 11th year covering the NFL full time. And it's a lot of stuff runs together and you kind of get into the rhythms of it. The inertia can take over every once in a while. But each year, things stick out. Things kind of grab you by the shirt collar. It's like, this is what you're going to remember from this year. And that game that Josh Dobbs had and all the stories about just how they were doing this, like what practically it looked like in real time, it was an incredible moment. So we'll dig into some more like at the line of scrimmage stuff, I think later on in the show. There are a few other things I wanted to talk about, but let's talk about a couple performances from last week that we haven't been able to get to yet. We have not discussed the Will Levis game against the Steelers on this show because we didn't have a Thursday night recap last week because I was on the road for a funeral, so I appreciate that. And so I wanted to ask you, going back and watching the Will Levis game against the Steelers, what stood out to you about the way that he played in his second game against Pittsburgh?
I would say the first thing, I mean, there's a lot of different. The first thing though was both 2-minute drives, like both 2-minute drives against one of the better defenses that just makes their living on sacks and turnovers. And the 2-minute drive at the end of the half was amazing. Like made this 3rd and 13 throw off his back foot on this little corner and up versus quarters coverage that I was just like, what? Like you watch it, you're like, he doesn't look like a rookie who's in his second start. Like just doesn't look like that way. And quite honestly, I don't know if America was ready for him because you look at what Vrabel said about him. He's like, yeah, he's a third quarterback. Like everyone just sort of like wrote him off. Like, yeah, he fell in the draft. And man, he's one of 10 rookie quarterbacks to now start because Tommy DeVito is starting this coming Sunday at 10. It's a record. It's the most ever, which is wild to me. And it just looks like he's ready to play. Like it's a 2-minute drive and then a 2-minute drive with no timeouts. After that, like they had 2-minute drives in the second half at the end of the game. His first one didn't end so hot, but then to be able to actually drive down and give yourself and your team a chance to win on the road in Blitzburg, the steel curtain of a defense, and that's how they're winning. They're not winning because of their offensive play. They're winning because of their defense. Like it's a moral victory for the guy because he was, and it really honestly probably showed the team more in his second start than he did his first start when he threw for 4 touchdowns.
I totally agree.
Like he showed way, because like a lot of times it can be this like, catches lightning in a bottle and it's like, okay, cool. And then the rest of the season just, I was just so impressed with the way he operated just in general, like just able to actually go out there and you see him at the line of scrimmage, calling out Mike IDs, switching protections, signaling. And I'm like, this guy was ready for his opportunity and he proved it to his team. And that's why Mike Vrabel said earlier this week that he's going to be the starter moving forward.
It's funny watching the mix of moments where they really trusted him and moments where they didn't. Remember, they got the ball near midfield late in the game. They ran the ball 3 times, ultimately didn't get a first down. That was frustrating to me to watch because earlier in the game, I think it was on their second drive, they have 1st and 23 from their 5-yard line. And they line up an empty. They line up an empty on 1st and 23 from their own 5. And I'm like,
hit the hop on the little.
Oh, it's a beautiful throw. Just
amazing.
A beautiful throw.
Yeah.
And them doing that, I'm like, man, that's a lot to put on a guy in his second start on the road in Pittsburgh in the shadow of his own goalpost is giving him that look on 1st and 23, and he fires a bullet. And listen, it's a mixed bag. He threw 3 or 4 balls in this game that
should have been picked. Yeah.
6 inches one way or the other, they're intercepted. And that's before the last drive. I don't care. You're throwing an interception when you're down to touchdown with a minute left. I don't give a shit. Like you got to try to make something happen. But there are plenty of throws he put up for grabs. So it's not all perfect, but some of the in-breaking routes, the throw in under pressure outside the numbers that he hit, that was gorgeous. What is most impressive to me is the physical talent is undeniable. The guy has a hose. The arm angles are very real.
The release.
The release is beautiful. It reminds me, and this is I hesitate to use this word, but it's or this guy's name, but it's the guy that kept coming up when I was thinking about it. The way he throws the football reminds me of Zach Wilson, but he is
Interesting.
bigger than Zach
Yeah.
Wilson.
Yeah, he's
And so I
yoked. He's
think
been doing too many curls. I'm like, dude,
and
chill out, man.
so I think that stuck out to me multiple times in this game, where the
Yeah.
strength he has in the pocket is actually a really important thing because he can
Yeah.
get out of pressure. He made throws while getting tackled. And with this offensive line, he's going to have to deal with a lot of muddy pockets. So
And yeah.
it was a really fascinating experience watching that second game because I thought we learned a lot more than we did the first game.
Yeah, and that's what I probably stood out the second most was the pockets weren't great. Obviously,
They're
because
not going to be on that team.
you got Highsmith and you got Watt and you got Watt was lining up over the center, all sorts of games. They were ready for him. But he just sort of stood in there and he didn't look I hate to use the word frightened, but sometimes rookies are not frightened is not the right word. Maybe just like spooked a little bit of like
They're
the type
bothered.
of pass rush. They're bothered a little bit. And honestly, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad. He didn't look bothered at all. Like it was just like step up, guys at my feet. He's getting sawed down, which I don't like that one where he got taken out as he's throwing his I did not know how that was not roughing the passer. But there's a couple of those that were just like that. And he's just able to contort his body in a way that I'm like, whoa, like it just makes you on film like, whoa, like it actually is like, hey, like, hold on, like, let me rewind that. And did you just make this type of throw in a muddy pocket from a different arm angle? And sure enough, he has. I mean, the arm strength, looks better than I thought coming out of the draft. Like I'm saying, he's doing some curls, he's doing some bench, he's doing some arms, some shoulder, like everything, because it stood out to me.
He's already the most jacked quarterback in the league, right? Who else would even be in
Yeah.
the conversation?
I mean, he reminds me, not yet, and don't ever get like this, Will Levis, but the Brady Quinn. Like Brady Quinn was like so yoked and such a meathead that you just want to be just benching. I'm like, dude, don't do that. But like this dude is definitely, Will Levis is definitely doing some arm curls.
Yeah, he might be the most jacked quarterback in the league. There are
Yeah.
some secretly jacked quarterbacks. Like Justin Herbert is like way more jacked than I think people understand. Derek Carr is pretty jacked.
Dude.
So, but I think he already has that. But so
Yeah.
the pocket presence, and I think this is a very important distinction. It's why I hesitated to say Zach Wilson's name at any point. The difference, the key difference between those two guys, outside of the size, when you watch Will Levis at Kentucky, he's lived this life. That offensive line in Kentucky last year and just the supporting cast, period, he was under duress constantly. So we've already seen him have to navigate those spaces. Decision making and then a willingness to hang out of the ball too long were some of the things that people were worried about coming into the draft. When you watch Zach Wilson at BYU, the arm strength and the arm talent was undeniable the same way it is now, but he never, ever had to deal with an ounce of pressure that entire year because they were always at a talent advantage. So the fact that all the stuff that we want to see translate in terms of the arm strength and that physical ability is combining with his ability to kind of still deal with those muddy situations, I think that there is a lot to like about what you've seen from him so far. And after that game was over, I said pretty definitively, I was like, there's no reason he shouldn't keep playing. You have run out of reasons why he should be the quarterback for the rest of the season. And clearly Tennessee came to that same conclusion.
Well, and that was my first thought was the first game, it was like, okay, like, yeah, he played really well and he was just dropping bombs. Like I was like, okay, you're not going to be able to bomb at every single game. I want to be able to see you work underneath. I want to see your middle range accuracy. I want to see your deep range accuracy out on the outcuts. And after the game against Pittsburgh, I mean, that's what came to my mind. I'm like, he's going to really have a hard time going back to the bench. Like they're going to be like, we drafted him for a reason. He's got to be able to run with it. They might make a late season push. Who knows? But it's definitely Will Levis time in Tennessee, in my opinion.
People are going to talk a lot about why did we miss, if this keeps going, right? If he hits and he works out, and it's way too early to start having this conversation. But if that happens, people are going to be like, well, why did he fall to the second round? Why did this happen? And I think it's important to recognize that there are elements to his evaluation that make you worried. Like his willingness to stand in there and take sacks. He would just get crushed in the pocket last year at Kentucky, just absolutely crushed. And some of the decision-making stuff is real. Like too often, I think we've talked ourselves into these big armed guys who can throw the ball a mile when they have, they're overall they're lacking in other areas. So I don't think it's as simple as you watch that first couple games and you see how he throws the ball and say, how did that guy fall to the second round? Like there were definitely concerns coming in. It probably fell further than people thought, but this isn't, I don't want the revisionist history to creep in quite yet. Like there were
Yeah.
actual tangible reasons why he wasn't somebody that was drafted as high as those other guys were.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And honestly, I just think it's such a crap. We talk about all that. It's such a crapshoot evaluating quarterbacks in college because it's just you don't really know how good guys are until they're able to run an NFL offense, and that's why like the Brock Purdy thing to me is wild still because he's like Mr. Irrelevant and he's balling, and it's just like you got to give guys like this a chance to develop, and it was almost better for Will to sort of sit back to watch Tannehill, to watch Malik, and just be like, okay, like I tell this all the time, like, and it's the Aaron Rodgers thing. He sat for like 3 or 4 years before because he was able to understand the grasp the offense and not just be thrust into action and then make so many mistakes where your confidence is killed. Like I think this was really good timing for Will Levis to make his debut and his second start. And quite honestly, I'm looking forward to watching him moving forward.
But it's what if Tannehill doesn't get hurt? What if Tannehill plays this entire season and we never get to see him play? He clearly
Yeah.
wasn't showing enough in practice for them to be like, oh yeah, he's definitely the backup quarterback. So
Yeah.
there would have been a chance that we would have gotten all the way to the end of the year and they wouldn't have known
Yeah.
what they have in him. And it's just another example that every once in a while, it's just better to be lucky than it is to be smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And then honestly, there's this thing called gamers. Like I used to suck in practice at Missouri. Like I just was like, I wouldn't suck, but it would just be like, okay. But then sometimes when those lights turn on and between those white lines, especially quarterbacks, like you don't want to be known as a gamer as a quarterback because you want to have good practice habits. But for me, it was just like, man, I just felt it in the game. He looks like a gamer to me. It just like when it comes on, it just hits. It just makes sense for him.
So his talent and what makes him different is obvious. It jumps off the screen when you watch Will Levis play. A guy for whom that's not the case is Joe Burrow. And I wanted to talk about Joe Burrow and the game that he had on Sunday, but also just have a larger conversation about Joe Burrow because he's only been back for like 2 weeks. So we
Yep.
really haven't had a chance to dig into the good of Joe Burrow. And it was funny when I wanted to do a show about quarterbacks and I wanted to do a show with an NFL quarterback to kind of give us some more context about these guys. Joe Burrow is the guy I kept coming back to because unlike Patrick Mahomes, unlike Josh Allen, unlike Justin Herbert, I think a lot of the things that make Joe Burrow great outside of the pocket movement stuff, which you can see, is subtler. So after you watch that game on Sunday against Buffalo, and even the last couple games that he played,
Yeah.
if you were trying to explain to someone what makes Joe Burrow special, where would you start?
That's so, I mean, dude, when you were telling me, when we were talking about this pre-show production, I was just like, I have no clue. Like and that's a good thing. And I think I came to a realization that he does everything really well. Like in my opinion, there's no true weakness in his game, which just tells you the consistent level that he plays at. And I think that's probably what I'd go with is the consistency. He's always like a top 10. You rarely see him have a bad game. And you rarely see him make mistakes. So it's just like calm, cool, collected, Joe Cool, right? Like they like to call him. And it's just a consistent level of really high level play. When a lot of times when you say consistent, they're like, oh, that's a bad adjective on the way to describe people. I'm like, I love it because it's not only consistent, but it's consistent at a high level. And he just does the small things right, whether it's subtle movements in the pocket or whether just this like look off of the eye when he knows where he's going. He's got such a feel for that offense and Cincy that it just runs through him. And you could tell, I mean, the calf bothered him so much more than he probably let on. And honestly, Jamar Chase was onto something. He said, hey, I don't need Joe Burrow back to like week 7 or week 8. And look at the last 2 weeks. Like to me, when I really went down and watched Joe Burrow in the San Fran game, which that defense was reeling at the time, but you could tell they were probably going to come in and be like, all right, we're going to, we got Burrow, we're going to stick it to him. And then the way he was able to operate, dude, the dude was checking to a QB draw on 3rd and 9 and not telling his receivers that he was checking to it. He would like signal it and he'd check and even, big left tackle or like Orlando Brown's like, what are you doing? Like, are you okay? We're doing it in third and 9. And so like that to me, and the way he moved within the pocket. I mean, everyone saw that viral video of him, like everything that goes through a quarterback's mind. It was like this, like, all right, looks left, stiff arms his left tackle, gets out of a sack from Eric Armstead, stiff arms Joey Bosa or Nick Bosa, goes around the edge, throws a dart, like all this that goes into it. And I was just like, man, I gotta break this film down. And it was just everything that he did, he just does at a high level. I mean, it's hard to point something out that just separates him, but that's obviously what the Bengals love about him too.
I believe it was their first or second touchdown drive against Buffalo. There was a sequence that I just think really encapsulates who he is. The Bills send a corner blitz off of his left side, and he shakes it off. I mean, he weighs 225 probably. He's like 6'3". Yeah. He's bigger than you think he'd be. So if there's a guy who's 185, 190, he's able to get out of that stuff. And it, to me, is a non-negotiable part of why he's great. Like his ability to actually shake guys off in the pocket, beyond the pocket feel, he's big and strong. And that shows up all the time. So he shakes it off, escapes to his left, finds T. Higgins for a little completion in the flat. That's one play. Same drive, they send a simulated pressure at him with the defensive end dropping, and he knows exactly where his space is there. He knows that guy's not going to get wide enough, and he hits Irv Smith. It's a little stick. You know, it's an 8-yard gain, but just how quickly he sees that and understands, he's not going to be able to get to that spot, and I know it. Yeah. And then that drive gets finished off with him, just the ball placement on the corner out to Irv Smith is insane. And so that to me, like that 3-play stretch, that's who he is, where you have the ability to create in the pocket and the strength. You have his understanding of defensive structure and where space will exist. I think he's so good at that. And if you look at what the Bengals offense has been over the last several years, they're starting to tweak it. You know, there's more play action, there's more under center, there's more motion now. But the reason that they were so comfortable being so spread out is that when you have proper spacing within your offense, there's like a 90% chance that he's going to find the right choice. And that's, you just see it all the time. Like when their routes distribute and they're spaced correctly, you can only make so many right decisions as a defense. And he understands structure so well that he's consistently going to make the right choice. And then you combine that with how aggressive he is when the one-on-one situations present themselves. And that's another reason that I love him, is that the deep ball, the go balls, he's going to take them. He had one that was almost a touchdown to Tyler Boyd in that game. He took a shot to Jamar Chase that got broken up, but the amount of post-up completions he has to T. Higgins in those one-on-one scenarios, he knows. He's like, there's no way that this is a bad matchup for me. So the understanding of matchup, the understanding of spacing, I will be honest with this. When I first watched him play, it was easier for me to understand why Justin Herbert was great. And it's like, that's and Josh Allen. And then over the last couple of years, as I've watched Joe play, I've just come to appreciate who he is so much and how surgical he can be within confined space within an offense or within a defense. And I just think you've really gotten to see that over the last couple of games, and it makes this team really dangerous.
Well, and that's of all the things you said, I mean, everything was spot on, but the elite level of decision making, like that's not talked about enough in quarterback. You can have all the strength and all the like arm strength, like whatever you want in the world, and you can have all the tools of the trade as a quarterback. But if you can't see the game and process the game and understand the game at a level that not only understands your offense, but also where they're at and the space in the defense, just like you said, then you're not going to be a good quarterback. And so I think that is, the more you say it, that's what separates him, because rarely is he throwing. Like it reminds me of Peyton Manning in Denver, the year he threw for so many, like, and I hate to say it, but I'm not saying he is Peyton Manning yet, but I would say that what Peyton did that year was, it was elite actually underneath, knew when to get to screens. And then when shots like came up during the game, he would take them and he would hit them every single time. He was never putting the ball in harm's way on these shot plays. He knew when to take them. He knew the nuances of how a game was flowing, the ebbs and flows, and he was able to do that and take it. And I think that's what Joe does. Joe doesn't ever really try to force things. And so when you really look at it from a decision-making standpoint, he has such a grasp on that offense. It's completely transformed that organization to where he and Zach Taylor are on the same page saying, hey, you got it, man. Like, your decision-making is more important than your arm strength. Because I would say his arm strength is above average. Like, it's not anything crazy, but he throws
fine.
with anticipation. It's fine. That's perfect. He throws with anticipation. He's extremely accurate, but he knows where to go with the football from his mind and the way he prepares, and just that sixth sense of like, okay, I feel that a defense is doing this, I'm going to do this. And that, to me, I mean, I'm glad you said that. That, to me, is sort of what separates him.
Late career Peyton Manning is actually a good comparison, because I think people who are younger that didn't watch early career Peyton Manning could sling a football.
Dude,
when he was younger. And he was a much better athlete than people remember. Peyton Manning was like a pretty good at all the stretch play action that they would run. Like, Peyton Manning, late career Peyton Manning was not early career Peyton Manning, but in terms of arm strength and how you have to live, it's actually probably a better comparison, even at age 26, for Joe Burrow to compare him to late career Peyton Manning. So that's so funny that you say that, because I think there is a lot of that in his game. And what I've loved about watching them this season, and even watching them over the last 2 years, right? So early on, they're trying to do this weird combination of empty LSU Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor's background from the Rams, where it's under center and they're running a lot of zone. It's a mess, right? Like, they could not merge the worlds together, and they really struggled to do it. They still went to the Super Bowl, but it was very disjointed. Second year, they completely scrap it, right? We're going shotgun every play all the time. It's a shotgun-based run game. We're throwing the zone plays out the window. Our offensive line does this better, and they found what worked for them, but it was still very static in the same way that Peyton Manning liked it. I want to see it. I want to be able to see the defense and make my decisions. Okay, well, defenses started reacting to that, and they're going to be able to find solutions. And if you watch the Ravens play them, they're sending all these simulated pressures at him, and the picture is changing so much that static element to the offense becomes a negative, not a positive. All right, now we're in version 3. Where you still have some of the spread out elements that allow him to see the game that he wants to, but you're seeing a ton more motion. You're seeing more play action than you've ever seen within their offense, and you're seeing Jamar Chase line up everywhere. So them trying to problem solve this thing at every single stage and trying to stay one step ahead has been so cool to watch. And I think so far they've been able to pull it off every step of the way over the last 2 years.
Well, I think the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks of that offense is really the last 3 weeks of that offense is exactly to your point. Like, the first 4 or 5 games of the season, maybe 4 or 5 games of the season, Joe was in shotgun exclusively. And I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. And because I was doing a hit for NFL Network and we were talking about Burrow, and I went back and watched the game and I'm like, holy cow, the dude is in shotgun every single snap, and it doesn't lend itself well for any play action. It's very staticky, and that was just because of his calf. And then he gets under center the last 3 games, and you could tell, like, the offensive coordinator for the Bengals was super excited because he had this quote. He was like, well, we got Joe under center now, so we're good. And it's literally completely transformed their entire offense just by the fact of getting him under center. And so now they're rolling, and now they're, quite honestly, not the scariest team in the AFC, but up there.
So I was going to ask you this. We're at the halfway point. We're a month removed from them just being buried by pretty much every single person with a microphone. Understandably so. How many teams do you definitively feel better about on November 8th than you feel about the Cincinnati Bengals?
1, Baltimore Ravens. And maybe the Chiefs. I'm worried about the Chiefs offense, man, but their defense is insane. I would say the Ravens in the AFC. I would say the Ravens for me. And then it's either Cincy or that's it probably one other team. Like, I'm not like, I love the way that the Bengals are headed, and not only because of that offense, but that defense is low key really, really good too. So they're putting it together at the right time. And if they can stay healthy, dude, they got a shot to be back in the Super Bowl. Like let's just be honest with you. Like they really, really do.
I think the Baltimore is the best team in the league.
Yeah.
I truly believe that with the way they're playing on offense, the way they're playing on defense, they could just beat you in so many different ways. Like I believe what the numbers are telling me. I just
Yeah.
think that when you beat the shit out of good teams, you're really good. And that's what the Ravens have done so far this year. So I think that they're definitively the best team. I would
Yeah.
still give the nod to Kansas City because
Okay.
I have faith in the offense figuring it out over the course of the year, and the defense is playing at an elite level. After that, Philly's
Yeah.
pretty good, but I
Yeah.
think I might feel better about the Bengals right now than I do about the Eagles. As crazy
Yeah.
as that is with the Eagles being 8-1, it's probably close. But the fact that
Close.
they're
Yeah.
even in that tier right now, after what it felt
After
like
the
after
start.
that Tennessee game, is wild. But that's where we are right now. And
Yeah.
it just shows you how central he is to everything that they are. And
Yeah.
I believe this. I think, and this isn't a knock on him, I think injuries affect him in a different, more pronounced way than they affect some other guys. And some of that
Yeah.
I think is mental. Like if
Yeah.
you
I
think
agree.
you go back to when he had the ACL and he came back from it, he was very open about how much time it took for him to regain trust in his body. And I just think that there's something he has to get over. And all players are like this, but he
Yeah.
has to get over that hurdle. And when he's not over it, you can sense a huge difference in him. By the
Yeah.
way, he's over it. Like, he has
Yeah.
cleared the hurdle. He is all the way back. And
Yeah.
the league and just watching it week to week is so much better when he's playing at this level.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And especially, and you're right. It does. The more I think about it, it does affect him a little bit more injury wise, and everyone's different. But I mean, yeah, they're back now though. They are back in a big way.
Last thing we wanted to hit on this week. One of the biggest bits of news from the last week or so, Josh McDaniels getting fired by the Raiders, and then everything that happened in the 72 hours after that. All the leaked stories that happened, every single bit about what that meeting was like, the cigars in the locker room afterwards.
It was amazing.
So what I wanted to ask you, you're in a unique position to be able to talk about this. It happened once in your career. You've mostly played for very good Hall of Fame head coaches.
Yeah.
But in the instance where you didn't, in Detroit in 2020, Matt Patricia gets fired around Thanksgiving. I think it was probably right after the Thanksgiving game. The Texans at that point, when you guys played them on Halloween, were 1-7. Wow. The Houston Texans were 1-7. They put up 41 points against the Lions on Thanksgiving.
And that was Thanksgiving Day. Oh my!
That was Thanksgiving Day. So in front of everybody, and that was the nail in the coffin.
That was the final straw.
So 2 days later, which would have been Saturday, the firing is announced. So you guys probably come back to work on Monday, would be my guess, after the Thursday game. What is it like walking back into the building on the first day after your coach gets fired?
Well, in that situation, a little bit of relief, right? I mean, and both guys were Patriot Ways guys, right?
Yes.
Like that's unique in its own self and a different day conversation. But I think that Matt Patricia was like, I loved having one-on-one conversations with him. Like he was a guy's guy. He was a player's guy. And then there's just something that was a little bit different about him when he got in team atmospheres, and he would just, I think his downfall at the end of the day was trying to be too much of someone he wasn't, if that makes sense. Like
I think that's the case with a lot of those guys, right? I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but that seems to be a consistent issue for the Patriots guys.
And guys didn't hate him by any means. He definitely rubbed people the wrong way, but it was just time for a change. And then when he got fired, not because he got fired, but because of who took over for him, Darrell Bevell, it was like a breath of fresh air in terms of like, okay, like we know this season sort of lost on us a little bit. However, we get a chance to have a little bit more fun. We get a chance to have, and I don't know, and maybe it just lends its way to the Patriots way, guys, where they're very serious and they want everyone to sort of be walking on eggshells because that's sort of how it felt. And that's never, ever worked at anywhere I've been at. The places I've been at that have had the best time have had the best records, if that makes sense. You have fun. You go out there. You be yourself. you get yourself ready to play, because if you're not, then guess what? You're not going to play. I'm not going to threaten you to be like, you just won't. If you don't do it, you won't play. Like, if you don't go out there and actually put the product on the field, you just won't play. Like, that's how it is anywhere. Like, guys know that. But when you try to contain, is a good word, grown men, right? It tends to not be good, because you're dealing with 30-year-old men, like, with families. You can't try to, like, when I say control, like, just let them be themselves.
Give me
And you
an
sort of,
example. How would
well,
that kind of how would that suppression manifest?
yeah, I would say suppress. It's just like, if anyone gets, like, caught having a good time, or like in the locker room, like, hey, you need to focus in, or like, it's just like it's not just like the players, it's like suppressing the coaches, and sometimes the front office, and sometimes everything else. And it's just, there's certain fits, as you well know, that just, they don't fit. Like, you just tell, like, a certain amount. And that's what ended up with Mark Davis, was like, he could just tell, like, this is not working. Like, make the mistake, move on, even though it's going to cost me $85 million for my last 2 head coaches and my GM, which is wild. But then you bring in AP and Antonio Pierce, who was a player, who has lived it, who his whole mention and his whole speech to the locker room was like, man, I've been in your shoes. Have fun. Get your job done. But, like, if we can't have fun, like, it's serious enough. This game is scrutinized enough. There's a ton of people on the outside. Like, you just got to go out there and have fun. And sure enough, cigars, music, Devontae Adams jamming in the back of that video, like, all that stuff. It just makes a huge difference when, at the end of the day, you just are allowed to have fun. If that makes sense. It's hard. It's really hard to explain the dynamics, because if you're not in the actual locker room, it's just a feel thing, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. You're human beings. You want to enjoy
Yes.
going to work. Like that, there's nothing that complicated about that. So what I wanted to ask you, you came into the league in 2010. Okay. So this is right on the heels and deep in that stretch where the Patriots are just dominating everything, right? And so that's kind of the model, is that the Patriots are the class of the NFL. And I think that these sort of Belichickian clones that tried to come in and run teams this way were much more consistent. It was much more regular feature of the league. Over the last 15 years, 13 years, whatever, from the outside looking in and from a lot of conversations with coaches, things have changed. There is a different expectation among players about what the dynamics between players and coaches should look like, what communication looks like, what expectations look like, where ideas can come from, how collaborative it feels. How real is that? How different is the player-coach dynamic in 2023 from what was maybe acceptable or the standard in 2011?
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. And I think it's changed because really, youth as a whole has changed on how they've been raised. You're in the social media era. You're in this, like, everything is posted, you better watch your back era. You better, like, so everything's out there. This news cycle is continuous. It doesn't stop. Back in the day, before Twitter, before anything of that, you had to go home, turn on ESPN, turn on SportsCenter, and be like, okay, really get into the highlights. And the highlight packages were like 5 minutes long because everyone wanted to see. Now they're like 30 seconds because everyone knows. And so I think the news cycle helped change it. But I also think the people that were young then and growing up that were playing in the NFL, they have a different, it's so hard to put your finger on, but they have a different feel for how life in sports should be. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, like, a lot of kids, whether it's their own doing or not, there's a problem with entitlement in youth of today, especially now with NIL and college sports. Before NIL and college sports, it was just like, okay, cool. Like, I want to be part of the team. I want to do what's best for the team. And I think there's a definite change to be like, no, it's me, 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 me. What can I do for me? How can I post a social media clip? How can I do something for Instagram or for Twitter? And it's really just changed the dynamic from a team aspect to more of a me aspect. And I think coaches are starting to understand, hey, this old school way of thinking and sort of being a disciplinarian type coach is not working, because these guys that are coming into the league that are younger don't really respond well to that. It's a very dynamic and interesting conversation, but I hope that makes sense for people out there listening.
I think that there have been a lot of obvious ways where Sean McVay's influence in the league is apparent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's his assistants get hired, the types of offense that teams run. I think a lot of people have sought out their version of McVay when they've been looking for head coaches. And I think an unintended consequence of that is that we now have a very young generation of head coaches that are in charge of these teams. Think about what a head coach felt like in, I don't know, 2005. Like if I think of an NFL head coach in 2005, like the first person who comes to mind for me outside of like the stars is like John Fox, right?
Yeah.
So you got
Foxy.
like, and you know, John has great personality. He's like a classic NFL character, but you think of him in his late 50s and 60s. He's kind of this like old, kind of crotchety, like there's a certain feel to what coaches were. Now, look, just think about NFL coaches right now and think about how many of them were hired in their 30s.
Young. Yeah.
Arthur Smith, Zach Taylor, Kevin Stefanski, Matt LaFleur, Shane Steichen, Brandon Staley, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell, Nick Sirianni, all these guys who it's just a different era and a different generation that is now in charge. And I think that those guys setting the agendas and the feel of these buildings, you can feel it. You can feel the shift that's happened. And I think that when you have that as kind of not only a dominant thing in terms of the percentage of coaches that are in that sort of role, but that it's working, it's so easy then to contrast that with this like old school hard ass, we're going to make this like a miserable experience for you every single day. And I think players are probably fed up with that shit, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, he's a really amazing coach, but when you said that, Tom Coughlin like pumped into my mind.
Even better example.
Like just, this is the way it's done. We're not changing it. And this is how we're going to do it. I don't care if we're 2-10 or 12-2. And I do think people in really the players had been fed up with it, but where I think it's reaching is to the owners and to the front office people hiring these coaches, because they're seeing the change. They're the ones that are having to hire it. So the players, you might feel fed up with it, and finally you can't do anything about it if you're a player, because there's a hierarchy to it and you're not the one hiring. And so I think that's really where the dynamic shifted, was when ownership and front office people, including GMs, started to understand the change in dynamic.
And I think another good example of this year, D'Amico Ryans. D'Amico Ryans is 39 years old. Awesome. He was just a player. So I do think that there's something to that. And I think that there have been mistakes made as teams have sought out that archetype of coach. But I think that the feel in the locker room and what it's like for guys going to work every day and the benefits that can come with that, I do think that is a downstream effect of guys looking for this offensive wunderkind kind of model that Sean McVay created.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally. That's a great one. I love D'Amico too, man. D'Amico is, and that's the thing. Like that's what you want.
The vibes are immaculate.
Immaculate.
They are immaculate.
And they're playing. I mean, they got it right with CJ. That's for sure.
It's so funny how, and this is why we no need to go too far down this road. But when people think about these franchises and like, so and so is a poverty franchise, they're never going to be successful. You know how fast that shit can change. You know how many people it takes to change it? Sometimes it's one. In Cincinnati's case, it was one guy. And then they obviously had the right head coach in Zach Taylor, but it takes two guys. So this understanding of NFL franchises are monoliths. They never change. They're set in stone. I understand that it's difficult with bad ownership to overcome that consistently, but it doesn't take a lot. You get the right coach and the right quarterback, and it can happen in a big, big hurry. So the Texans, to me, are the best example of that. There was not a single thing about the Houston Texans over the last 2 years that said to me, pay attention to us. Pay attention to us. We are worth taking seriously. I couldn't feel more different about them now. I am so pumped to watch the Texans play the Bengals on Sunday. And that's how fast it happened. It happened in 6 months. Yeah. So it's worth kind of keeping that in mind as you're thinking about what the trajectory of these teams can look like. Chase Daniel, always good to chat with you, my friend. Yes. Great show. Really enjoyed it. Everyone, thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week. Same time, same place. Until then, please check out the other stuff that we have on the Athletic Football Show Network. I did Kiefer and the Beats this week with Zach traveling back from Germany. Really enjoyed chatting with a couple of our beat writers. Great conversation with Alec Lewis about all things Josh Dobbs from Sunday. Chatted with Dan Duggan about what's happening with the Giants, which was not as fun of a conversation. And then chatted with Ben Standig about what is Washington doing? Where do they go from here after all those trades last week? So encourage you guys to check that out. Please come back and check out our Week 10 preview that I'll be doing with Nate here in the next couple of days. We'll be running on Friday. Until then, really appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.